This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 27th year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. And boy, do we have auto information for you today. Ford has just announced details of the Tremor package for its popular Maverick pickup truck. We'll have details on that coming up. BMW has just introduced an addition to its EV lineup, and we'll have details on that too. It costs about $50K, I think. And you remember Dieselgate, don't you? You remember that, don't you, Chris? The scandal revolving around Volkswagen's falsification of emissions tests.
I bought one.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, it turns out Volkswagen wasn't the only company that was cheating. And we'll have more details and reveal that coming up. America on the Road is brought to you by Mercury Insurance and DrivingToday.com. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury. So imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at drivingtoday.com/auto insurance. That's drivingtoday.com/auto-insurance. Put that hyphen in there. Otherwise, who knows where you'll end up. Hi, I'm Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. And each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry. And
absolutely.
Now let's talk about the guilty parties. Dieselgate. It was a big deal, of course. I remember being interviewed on German TV about Dieselgate. It became a big thing, and even bigger in Germany than here, but a major thing here with, hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and just horrible stuff for Volkswagen falsifying their emissions testing and doing things with their emissions that basically allowed vehicles to squeak by that testing while not really passing. Criminal stuff. One of the things that hasn't been reported so much is the fact that there are other automakers that were involved in very similar kinds of things, including Fiat Chrysler. They were just sentenced. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles was just pleaded guilty very recently to the same kind of thing. And they're going to be paying nearly $300 million. This will resolve a U.S. Justice Department diesel emissions fraud probe. The company, this according to a Reuters story, the company has been charged with making false representations, lying, about diesel emissions in more than 100,000 U.S. vehicles, Jeep Grand Cherokees and the Ram 1500s that you and I probably drove and liked a lot, but unbeknownst to us, they were lying about diesel emissions. The U.S. government had previously required FCA, which is the parent company of these brands, now called Stellantis, to pay $311 million in a civil penalty and more than $183 million in compensation to the people who were injured as part of a class action lawsuit on this. This is a big deal, isn't it?
It is a big deal. And, Volkswagen paid a much steeper fine. It's something around $20 billion, right, when they went through this. But programming the vehicles to run cleaner when they're on the emissions testing software and then not when they're not, it's very sneaky. And, I guess if it were some sort of bug in the code or they made a mistake, that's one thing. But intentionally setting it up like this, it's got to smack for customers. It's got to feel bad for some of these customers.
Yes. The Justice Department said the FCA US, so, Fiat Chrysler, installed deceptive software features intended to avoid regulatory scrutiny. And they fraudulently helped the diesel vehicles meet the emission standards. I mean, it was a big deal and cost people their jobs. And I think there was prison time, actually, for people in Germany for what Volkswagen did. That's not going to happen to the Stellantis folks. There's another company also involved in something like this, and this is in the home country of Japan. And it's Hino, which is an affiliate of Toyota, essentially a truck maker in Japan. They did the same kind of thing. We were thinking this was isolated to Volkswagen, right? I mean, that's the way it seemed. But they were doing the same kind of thing, and again, dating back to 2003. I think before the diesel emissions scandal. This related to diesel emissions more in the Japanese home country than the United States. But then they falsified data too for 4 different engines. And they were finally found out And they kind of blamed the culture in Japan, the culture of, well, if the boss says and the boss doesn't want to hear bad news, let's not give him bad news. You and I have all worked for bosses who don't want to hear bad news, but at the same time, if the bad news or a failure to report the bad news makes you break the law, maybe that's a whole different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the penalties for getting caught are probably much worse bad news than just going ahead and pulling the Band-Aid off and fixing your emissions issues to begin with. I mean, 300 million is one thing, but how much bad faith or how much lost business or customer perception are they going to get out of this? Time will tell. But Volkswagen took a little bit of time to come back. I mean, obviously, people still talk about it when I mentioned that I own a GTI. So people don't easily forget, even if they're willing to forgive, I guess, and buy a car again.
Right. There's no mention here in this report about fines for Hino or fines for Toyota over this, but the shares of the company fell 10%. The stock price went way, way down just on this news. So bad news for them, bad news for the consumer, bad news for the companies buying these vehicles, and bad news for the environment. It's just kind of bad news all the way around. So
yes, it is.
It's a shame, but well, when we come back, we will have more uplifting news. And we'll be talking about two very cool F-150 pickup trucks, two variants of that. The F-150 Raptor, very, very cool for bashing through the Maine woods or maybe just driving down Main Street. And I was driving the F-150 Lightning. It's the all-electric vehicle with the frunk. So stay with us for that. When we come back, we'll join you with more on America on the Road.